Okay. We're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. An incredible topic has found me, a play on words that has been with me for a while. Finding the missing piece. And so, in this play on words, my intention is actually that the missing piece to every person's life is actually a missing piece. And what is peace? Peace is a resolution attained through the direct experience, and it's kind of like the ultimatum of what you're left with after you acknowledge a moment. Now, to speak about peace, I am just a piece of this cosmos, I'm just one guy in a universe of a billion trillion stars just making mouth noises as an evolved creature. Let me tell you, here's my mentality that life, when it just very basic viewpoint, that in life we tend to administer reality by measuring it, and we can say that people measure themselves into characters in stories, and their measurements upon the world dictate what kind of character that could be. That means that if you're a very young child and you go to an environment, and in the environment for no reason the environment is against you, then you can be pushed by the voice of the environment, or you can discover your own voice. I remember I was at a house party, and it was a bit of a out of control house party, in the sense that, like, this was in Canada, and there were people just fighting, like, and I remember there's an alarming sense to stop. Then you realize, no, you're the stranger in the party. Beating each other up was normal in that house party, you know. But it was too savage. I just left the room after some point. But I remember finding one of the people was in that fight, and I'm like, why do you guys fight? What is so appealing about it? And that person made only one good point, and he said that when you fight with someone, you gain a respect for them you didn't have. And so I wondered, I mean, like, I could totally understand any time in my own life, during my schooling years, especially when I lived in Iran for some years, that was how can I tell you, the school was a battlefield. I mean, it's like you just acknowledged it was a battlefield. But anyways, I was opened up to this this perspective that engagement reveals more worlds from the other. Therefore, people feel as if they know each other more when they've gone through an experience together. Do you know? So there was something unique there about an experiential dimension required to satisfy how the creature was a subject to itself. And that experiential dimension, I'm kind of happy I caught on to it. You know, I think the greatest realization I had in this life, 2011, where I was sitting on a rock in the middle of nowhere, and for the first time I was like, who's looking through my eyes? I have lived so many years on this planet, but I still don't know. Because every thought I had on myself, I noticed I can have another one. And I'm observing that, and I can have another one. And it took me a while to suddenly realize that I am not the thoughts that I inhabit. Did you hear that statement? I'm not the thoughts I inhabit. And that means we inhabit language. We are in a world where, believe it or not, on some level, it is so ridiculously void and empty that we have no choice but to have faith in the animate movement to be something. Do you know? That means, really, if I kind of wondered, it's like, how are various governing narratives around the world defining the world? And so I notice, if you feel your world is going down the drain, if you feel your civilization has ships in it that are sinking the ship, and in some sense you can't endure, guess what? The moment you feel the world is against you, you have indirectly allowed the world of your inner realms. You have allowed your inner realms to be against you as well. That means in life, one cannot have 24/7 peace, because peace is not per se a conditional awareness, it's an unconditional awareness. Because any conditional peace is like how Sri Ramana Maharshi told Papaji on the mountain of Arunachala. Papaji was this young mystic who was just like in some trance state dancing with God, and Sri Ramana Maharshi, the super enlightened guy, he comes and he's like, "Hey kid, what are you doing?" And Papaji tells him, "I'm dancing with Krishna." In other words, he's saying, "Buddy, I'm dancing with God. Can't you see?" And Sri Ramana Maharshi is such a lovely person that he looks at him and he says, "Oh, you're dancing with Krishna. Nice." But remember, a God that comes and goes is not the real God. And when I tell you that the kind of peace, that missing piece I'm talking about, it's an unconditional awareness. You see, your state of mind, it doesn't have to do with just how you administer or, let's say, pilot your physical body with attention. Your body is actually navigating through subjective context. You know what that means? That means we may think it's just matter and empty space, but this matter is in spheres of language. It's in spheres of linguistically simulated value. I remember in last night's talk speaking about Civilization 2.0 and speaking about phase 3 of Civilization 2.0, where it would be a total restructuring of nationhood. And even though on some level, you see, guys, a technology is neither good or bad. If it is used in the right way and at the right time, it is good. If it is used at the wrong time and in the wrong way, it is inefficient. So what does that mean? That means a person can write a story. Imagine someone writing a story in history, and imagine that person being selfless. The moment they're selfless, for them, they are not writing for a world, because the world is changing. They are writing what their eyes could see. The missing piece of my life was that I was rushing it without realizing it's an empty page that I can take my time and draw upon. You see, when you have a rush, you won't access your own style. Anytime you're hurried to do something, the outcome has become more important than the process. Anything in this life that the outcome, the consequence of it is more, the reward at the end is more important than the process, it will become unconscious. You know what that means? That means it's like a businessman. I remember hearing this story where it was like, okay, long story short, um, the distant relative of a king who used to sell refrigerators and get commission realized that if he sold military jets, he would make like billions of dollars worth of commission. Not billions of dollars, but like a lot of money worth of commission. So this person does this, and then he had two children, a daughter and a son, and he gives each of them like 100 million. Can you imagine that? That's like next level parenting. Here you go, son, 100 million for you, and here you go, my daughter, 100 million for you. Now look at what happens. It's incredible because the son. Uh, Let me tell you what the daughter does. The daughter is smart, is smarter than the son, and the daughter doesn't waste, doesn't show off the money and invests it, and let's say that 100 million in the next 10 years becomes 150 million. But the brother, the son, The son is given paradise too quickly before he has the strength to actually walk in it. You know, some people can be given paradises before they're ready to walk in paradise. You know, so anyways, what happens with the son? Hopefully, my voice is clear, guys. You know, like please let me know if this is being cut on and off. Aside from the moments that I just, you know, there's some moments where I pause for intermission. You know, anyways. The son shows off. The son goes and invests in the first pitch he hears in a lot of things. And so the son comes back. The son, like the moment he's given the 100 million, he's top clothing, top notch, the biggest parties, you know. And he buys a company and he brings someone to run the company. And he's like, all right, you run it. You know, I'm going to go party, you know, make me money, you know. And the guy goes. Now, this is what I was saying. The person that second one, the second, we can say the brother compared to the sister, the brother just cared for the consequence. He didn't care for the process that led to the consequence, but the daughter cared for the process, and the brother ends up losing a lot of his money because he invested in so many businesses he wasn't having an eye on. He wasn't watching over his business, so the business kind of slipped out of his control. You know, that's the thing about anything a person starts. You gotta look at it, and that's why for me the greatest motivation came when I managed to see an idea as valuable as a human being. Usually, it's the opposite. You know, in other words, to see an idea as valuable as a human being means that if I, for example, saw you on the street, the unknown potential of who you can be surpasses everything I see about you. Do you know? So, what does that mean? That means people are like slingshots and we don't know how far each is held back. The DNA of every human being is, think of it this way, it's a unique key into a door that only your eyes can open. You know, it's like this kind of ancient way of saying that the soul is is the key. Okay, here the door is the body, the key lock is the mind, the doorknob is the mind, the key lock is the mind, and the soul is the key. This is a playful way of kind of animating that relationship. So, anyways, the son messed up. The son messed up. The father saw his kid and he's like, Jesus Christ, I gave you 100 million. You could have spent like 2 million of it and partied, you know? You know? And there is this other story, guys. I just remembered. I gotta simultaneously say this because there's parallels. There's this story that there's this master back in the day. He has three servants, and he gives each of his servants money, like something, some financial. He gives them some coins, okay? And the servant's like, I'm gonna. The master's like, I'm leaving now, guys. I've given you this. I'll come back and see what you do. Now, what happens? The master comes back, sees out of the three servants, one of them has invested, has made, like, let's say those 3 coins uh, into 9 coins. We go and see the second one did some sort of weaker investment and he made the 3 coins into 6 coins. And the master's like, nice, you know, you got potential, kid. You know? And so the master goes to the third servant, and the third servant was so honest, was so humble and simple. And he's like, Master, you gave me these 3 coins, so I didn't want anything to happen to these 3 coins, and I buried them in the ground. And then the master looks at the third servant and says, so you're telling me I gave you a value and you just held it? You didn't do anything with the opportunity you were given? And the master scolds the servant in this old story. You know, the third one, it's like, what are you doing? You know, burying money in the ground. Oh man, language is hilarious. So, anyways, the moral is that opportunities are given. Your existence is an opportunity. It's a mysterious opportunity. It's good to be kept as a mysterious opportunity because it means when new dimensions arise, it won't feel like a colossal change. So I'm kind of saying that maybe this missing piece from the human being's life is this missing piece, PEACE, is an acknowledgement that the process has as much value as the reward, as the consequence. I mean, think about it. Most people are living lives where they're working uncomfortably and inefficiently until one day they reach that efficiency. And so you go look at, you type in motivation on YouTube, and you just see people shouting, work hard, work hard, work harder than everybody else. Just work hard, work hard. But let me tell you, hard in an inefficient system is like trying to run against the river and people telling you, work hard, man, you'll get there. If you're against the river, it's inefficient from the beginning. So if a person learns to enjoy the process of living, not just the destination, not just the reward, you know then that means, like, if you think about it, the reward is just going to be one moment in the future, but the process is all the moments that are leading to that moment. So if one can realize that there is a sort of joy of just being a moment of awareness to all sort of movement of self, then that's, how can I tell you? That's looks a little more like an advanced civilization. you know, Life is a pattern at the end of the day. It's a sequence or of events. It's a series of choices. These choices each leave the canvas brushed. What does that mean? That means everything that moves is simultaneously moving its experience of everything. We are not just going from the past to the future, we are also creating what the past means to the future and what the future means to the past. And it is a secret. I don't know, I don't want to say secret, but it's like, for a long time I was like, why did the ancient spiritual sages, kind of like the spiritual masters of the East, why did they see the ego and say leave? And that's what I noticed should be different from this modern generation. That it doesn't matter how many times ancient eyes open up in new ways. Sight is sight at the end of the day. Sight is sight. It just is. That's the beauty of it. The magnificence of nature is how that tree is there for me to see it. And the superior magnificence of nature is how I am here. It's like most people are trying to find joy. They're trying to get something from the world. They think that they have to take something in order to be something. And it may seem true because we had to survive as animals in competition with our environment. It is only an advanced civilization that is no longer fighting the environment. Inaction creates space. Action creates the movement in the space. Action is the movement. That means, who would I be if I had never spoken? Who would you see if there was no subjective design to what I was saying? For me, it's life is a journeying through various spheres or various ranges of your sensory perception. It's like it's like the brain is an antenna, and it's receiving sensory perception and expressing it somehow, in through a subjective character in a story. So what does that mean? That means we need language an individual body. We need language to be an individual to ourselves. We have to, there is a subjective realm that we as a species have been oblivious to, but it is there. It is there, and it is so there that the definitions of there arise from it. You see, when I look at an object, like look at any object, like what is the purpose of a rock? If somebody asks, what is the life purpose of a rock? What is the life purpose of, this object that's just here? You know? And you realize before you have the story, the object is here. And that's the cool thing about your reality. Your reality is like given imagination. It's imagination it's like we're living in the thoughts of unknown dimensions, and we are thinking we know it all. I don't know. I think it was one of my talks. I hope that get some attention is this talk I gave where I say, "Are we the imagination of God?" You see, I find there's a responsibility to everything that has been exposed to one's eyes. There was a time where for me, a lot of moments in life where reality doesn't make sense for me, I find myself just going in parks. I don't know why. It seems like a simpler place has a more less complex demands of one's being. I have uh, walked in, how can I tell you, just forests where it's just me and, like, a stream, trees, a few birds on the branches, light beams, the shadows they cast. And I remember just sitting. I don't know how to tell you, but sometimes when you sit, the world moves through you. When you don't move, though, you notice the world move. It's like when the person is still, divine will, the universe is moving. When the person is moving, um, sorry guys, I don't know how to, like, I can't turn the volume up. It's at its highest decibel range for the streaming, for the OBS streaming software I'm using. So anyways, hopefully it sounds better now. Hopefully, guys, I'll have the resources one day to have a legit studio. Hopefully, a balcony studio. That would be nice. But anyways, it's us when the cosmos wants to see you. Imagine you're a child in some sort of educational program, and the head of the educational program wants to see you. And it was for a first time where the unknown. I can't tell you that. I think the one thing that I did right in this life was trust the unknown in the silliest ways, only to realize that what seemed at first a flaw later on was had value. You don't know, but so many things in life have values that if the person had a memory that could remember everything. Some people are known to have photographic memories. For me, it's different. It's not photographic. It's emotional for me. That means an emotion suddenly brings with it, rivers of images for me. But anyways, anyway, it's when you can't lie. You see, you can only lie to that which there is a condition to its perception. But when you kind of are in nature, you see that you're kind of left with the intelligence of the world. You are left with living life, with animate life prior to inanimate definition. So the missing piece is caring one more time for the process of your life, and to notice that it has unknown dimensions. It's like no one can tell you what only your eyes have access to, what only your DNA permits. When our attention goes to the process, I think it's how Buckminster Fuller very creatively says God is like a verb. This truth we seek is not a noun, it's like a verb. And so it means that in that attempt to find, it is an introduction into a pattern of form. So whenever a person goes to find something, they have to choose some road. Inevitably, a road will appear. Now, that road is the process's emergence. Now, if the person wants a film, it's kind of like some people imagine watching a film just to, for one moment in the middle where you can pause it and just see a screenshot. People who want life to be contained in a belief, it's like they want a film to be a screenshot, to be a fix, and it can't. That's the issue. That's why belief systems break in the dynamism of an changing experiencer. Zen Master Dogen has this quote saying where it's as if like somebody, like I could totally see some guy who's busy, and he comes up to Zen Master Dogen and he's like, "Hey, Zen Master Dogen," he sees him in the street and he's like, "Hey man, can you just tell me what this enlightenment is? Okay, what the Buddha's path is? You know, I got work to do. You know." And the guy is asking it so honestly. The Zen Master Dogen is like, "Okay." And Zen Master Dogen, I mean, of course, I'm animating the story, but what it is that his quote is to follow Buddha's path is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. This is the transition, just to add a side note, of noun like reality becoming a verb like reality. So to study the self is to forget the self. And then Zen Master Dogen says, to forget the self is to awaken to the nature of all things. In other words, karma is self-restriction, but of a self that has not comprehended its relationship as being unknown first. Anytime you see the known first, um, you can say the suffering is coming first. Anytime here's the thing, it's like if you see the known first, the unknown can be rejected. If you see the unknown first in your process of thinking, regardless of how there is acceptance or rejection, it's an unknown movement. So ultimately, I feel that we can say all the human beings on this planet, their belief systems are divided between being directed towards ultimately the known or the unknown. Think about it. Religious people or any person with a religious affiliation or subjective outlook, we see what is it? You are your ideal. All your ideologies are pointed towards an unknown movement. That means when you go ask the religious man, what do you think is going to happen in the future? The religious man would say it's God's will. It's like, why are you asking me, bro? I didn't create this world. And so you see, it's like the unknown makes us see that the movement of the world is before us, before we were here, and the known makes us feel that before we were here, there was no movement. So our knowledge, by the nature of its definition, is is separate from the unknown. I feel this great, um, believe it or not, transformation. I know this sounds cliche, but I don't know what it is. I found a way to kind of playfully animate it as the multidimensional renaissance. Pretty much, we have been a evolutionary creature that has just been limited to relationships with object to object. Recently, and in a very short time, it has become a subject to itself. The moment it has become a subject to itself, objects have found to have infinite value. The moment objects can have infinite value, free will comes into development, meaning that there's many. It's like one static phenomena can move in multiple ways. So what does that mean? That means all evolution is another way of an unconscious objective effort to become a conscious subjective realm. I feel DNA is uniquely like how the moonlight is actually sunlight. I feel that we are designed in the reflection of an ever present attention to the void that can move anything. Language is it's really where the next great mysteries of the world are. You see, a civilization, in order to advance, must update its external technologies and must update its internal technologies. The inner technology is how the civilization is giving the member, the citizen, a story. Not all, like, there's no person alive, or let's say no person who's been part of society that is just functioning under a story that they feel is only true. I have seen so many people, too many people, who in crowds their nature changes. And it's not that they're weak or strong, it's that it's like some people, the storm is too heavy, so they need to find shelter, and sometimes shelter is deviating from your nature to adjust with what the crowd wants. You see, in every generation, there are technologies lost and there are new technologies that come into the picture. I've noticed all the sort of inner ceremonial or ritualistic, you can say, technologies that ancient cultures had. We cannot, it's like right now there's so many lost technologies. The ancient world, history erases the ancient world. It's as if history, um, what is it? It's like history. I honestly feel the process of true intelligence is kind of like the Spartan movie where the dude threw his kid like into a jungle to kill a wolf while falling backwards. It's like you have to put your mind in a state where it has to make the decisions. Independence cannot arise, by the way, unless the person is comfortable to see all dimensions of an archetype. You know, most people, they want to access just the pleasant dimensions of the archetype, but the moment something rough comes, they snap out of that picture. This is why how can I tell you, the inner strength of any human being that lies is divided. Your inner strength gets divided anytime you don't abide by the simpler, decent pace of your own intelligence. Philosophy is a crack in the simulation, and language is what the simulation is made out of. That means it's like you can say there can be totally a school of philosophy that believes, they ask them, what is this world? And they're like, you can't explain it. And they're like, what do you mean? It's like, you can't explain it. And it's as if so many people going by and being like, you can't explain it. But then why is the design, why is an intelligence in motion that can acknowledge design? You know, it's like you have a cup, the purpose of the cup is fulfilled when you drink from it. You know, you have a human being, the purpose of the human being is fulfilled when the planet lives through you. I don't know how else to say it. It's I feel we have a relationship with our moment that is conceptual, where I say it's the subjective realms, and a relationship with the moment that is so instantaneous it can't be a concept. At most, it's unknown witnessing. If one doesn't realize, like, you know, there was this ancient esoteric concept that not only are we souls, like they entertained the idea of souls back in the day, but it was also this notion that the soul shouldn't the best way to handle the body wasn't for the soul to be in the body, was for the soul to be outside of the body. And I kind of wondered for a while, like, whoa, what did that mean? And that out of body notion, first I was thinking about it based on the objective realm. But when I looked at it subjectively, it means out of a body of conception, which ultimately means we can, our individual consciousness appears to us as static particles. Our collective consciousness appears as as dynamic rhythmic waves. So I'm telling you, we evolved from an object, like evolution is another way of saying an object evolved into a subject to itself. Now, the subject is evolving into an experiential rhythm. Do you know this would mean potentially that in 180 years, let's just do, you know, I don't know, that number comes to me. Like, let's say in 180 years, we're going to have philosophers, and it's going to be a global discussion. Hopefully civilization too would have its eyes open by then. But like, philosophers would go and debate and be like, for the first time, like shouting to all human beings, we have to decide what it means to be an individual when experience can be experienced to move collectively and rhythmically. That means it's another way of saying pretty much if there is in the future a sort of mass technological revolution and transformation of the world, it's another way of saying, does it make sense to connect our heads to computers? But it's like the esoteric version of it was that. In other words, the idea of kind of to move your body by being outside of your body is another way of saying a collective intelligence moving an individual system. Because I'm telling you, there came a unique thing, guys. Like, I'll tell you, I saw my hand, and I remember I had this unique moment where, you know, I was like touching my hand with my right hand, with my right, like index finger, touching the palm of my left hand, and then touching the table, and then touching the palm of my left hand, and touching the table, and just holding my hand there. And for a second, I was just wondering, what is it that separates objective experience from being me and not me? What makes an object me? What makes me the object, and what is the object before it's me? In other words, that kind of inquiry. And so I noticed that the free will, the free will is the light in the room of the ownership of the ideological realm. Your attention is simultaneously your free will. That means based on where your attention is, you have freedom to move based on whatever that scope of attention provides access. And anybody listening, guys, feel free to share angles you see. For me, when I give a talk, pretty much I put certain concepts in front of myself and I look at them, you know. And so when I'm looking at them, I'm accessing certain angles in regards to my own sort of my eyes. But anybody who's listening and they see certain unique angles to the concepts I bring up, feel free to share in the comment section, in the chat section. Yeah. Life is an effort of energy instantly being conscious of itself. This instantaneous consciousness appears as a separation from the world. That means in the evolutionary way of going about things, we were the world. Then it's like we rose from the dirt. I have this theory that all psychological evolution is just echoing the on and off switch effect. All our fear of the darkness and love towards the light is just a cosmological relationship. Okay? What does that mean? That means I feel our minds, their ancestry goes back to the plant kingdom. And it goes back to the plant kingdom in the way that we sprouted from the earth. Okay, we sprouted. That means it's as if you plant a seed in the earth. It's like, we can say, isn't it fascinating, guys, when you look at even the biological in regards to intercourse, like the seed, the seed is intelligent. This world has within it already functioning intelligence. Like if you think about it right now, your biological body, you're not thinking about your heart. You're not telling your heart, it's like you're not making a to-do list. All right, tell my heart to beat, tell my lungs to breathe. It's happening. It's nature. It's like you have trust on so many levels of your being, you know. And when a person, like this is ignorance of just being in the language, in the linguistic simulation, that you forget the value you already have because a certain outcome didn't happen. That is like the moment where the gods were like, oh man, I thought this person was great. What happened? What happened was that the attention was piloted differently. I feel there's no such thing as people with an image. Like you can't look at the dictionary and get a definition of personality. You know, personhood is animated in different ways based on different points of intelligence. And so, really, what it is we have two choices. Either look at this cosmos and be like, all right, it's not intelligent, it's just an empty room. Or we look at it and what if there's intelligence, we just can't recognize it. I feel that approach is way more efficient and it will open up the um, educational system from professors becoming statues of worlds soon that may be forgotten. You know, I say there's an apocalypse hitting the educational system, and it's this fundamental realization that, again, just like fire was kind of discovered, was sparked, we sparked this process of attributing symbols upon the objective realm, and the subjective realm is being conducted with invisibility. When I say invisibility, that means your thoughts. Like imagine like a bag of popcorn right now hovering in the air. That imagination doesn't suddenly appear. You don't have a physical bag of popcorn just because you imagine one. So what does that mean? That means your imagination is a design. You can access the designs in your imagination, but you can't, it's not real at the density of physicality. And what does that mean? That means there was a time where I would visualize something and I wondered how could I move that visualization. And so, like, it took me a while to be able to, in my inner realms, ascribe geometry with any sort of objective movement. What does that mean? That means um, uh, this is all we can say in regards to visualization and certain approaches to what that could mean, that concept could mean. Where I, for example, like, how can I say it? I was listening to a song and the song was like this sort of classical, like suddenly it had a rise. It was like da 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 da, like it was like some next, like some I don't know how to say it. It was like some rise, okay. And the moment in the song where it rise, my hand playfully, my eyes were closed, but my hand, not how can I say it, like my for it was for a second. It was as if my eyes were closed. I was hearing the music, and by the nature of my physical hand just elevating into the air in my inner realms, I saw geometrical lines, for example, arise. You know? So, what I'm saying is, we can't, at most, you can have a interaction, playful, kind of ambiguous with your subjective realms, but your subjective realms are not here to replace objectivity. They may reflect it, but they're not here to replace it. That means a thought cannot be a person. In other words, the nature of the universe is it's changing. So whatever dimensions you see to yourself as a person, that's also changing. You know, so we have no choice other than to begin wondering about not life as some story, but as a dynamic process where we're trying to just make more sophisticated our engagement. You see, an advanced civilization cares for itself. And any act of not caring for how far humanity has come is ignorance. That means it's like this was what broke my heart. You know, that I realized there's so much violence, but if all those people conducting the violence were asked, hey man, it took 4 billion years for the species to evolve this far. Is it really that okay for you to erase human beings with violence? And you see, no, because it's an unknown potential. We don't know. It's like in all the poverty commercials you have ever watched in your life. It's like, you know, there's some tears that one would have will be like, holy shit, that's fucked up. Why is that child going through that messed up life? You know, another view is, oh my God, it's so fucked up because that child could be an Einstein we don't know about. So when you care for your species, you have to care for the potential of the mind of human beings. What does that mean? That means there has to be some sort of uh, re, re, remodeling, redesigning. We just need pretty much the psychologists, philosophers, and just pretty much every human being to contribute in wondering about how we can uh, create a collective, efficient um, river of movement of our inner realms, pretty much. You know, I've had moments where I've also gotten tired of speaking, believe it or not. And what it is it's just the intention behind the act. It's what you see before you move. And it's also later on, I find, after the person has taken more than 20 laps around the sun, they'll begin to see it's also about what moves before you do. There's a joy, there's an honor, there's a hidden honor in helping this whatever it is to advance. What else can we do? What greater game can we play? Regardless of if you're an immaterialist or a materialist, what greater game can you play? We are it's like there's no it's like as if the script has been written and the actors are on stage and the cameras are rolling. That's how life is in the conscious waking state. It's one where the show has begun, and so every moment is your own performance. And when you can perform in this life in a way where it doesn't, so many people, you see, personality, it's an ambiguous thing. It's like us putting a flashlight at night on a river and just seeing that chunk of what comes to light. That means there is no clinical therapist or psychologist on this planet who can see all the ways the let's say client sees. So what does that mean? That means we each have our own private universes that we're living in. And so most people think that they have to get rid of that private universe and go find some outer universe that is common to all. But I'm telling you, you gotta just go at your own pace. There's no greater wisdom. Literally, it's like it's too dynamic. Trust me, there is no wisdom in dead language. Because words are just shadows of images that really were, of ideals or notions that could be. I remember for the first time I had seen not a not just the face in the clouds, but a head, and I made this book. It's hopefully I can find it. The first poetry collection I wrote was called The Polished Ones. And really what it is that language is honestly like luggage after some point. You're just carrying it for uh, its utility. Albert Camus. He said, "In the depths of winter, I found within me an invincible summer." It means whatever you are as a being, you are a conscious cosmic glance at occurrence, at happening. That means if we wanted to give the life a purpose in accordance to what the person has to do, it's already being done. Nature is growing into complex and more sophisticated ways of its own acknowledgement. You know, there was this hadith that the Sufis acknowledged, that it was called Hadith Qudsi. And what it was that it said, it was as if it was like this narration, it was as if the voice of God was saying, "I was unknown and I wanted to be known, and so man arose." And so man is the effort of a vast, meaningless, unconscious process to become conscious. That means for a long time I was wondering, you know, I'm telling you, because in my youth, how can I say it? Religion is a unique artistic dimension to my perception. And in my youth, it was as if I wondered, it was like, how can I tell you? I was so, I was more concerned if I was praying right than if my prayers were being answered. But then there came a time where I was like, how would the answers of my prayers arise? And then I realized the whatever uh, is the unknown source of all this has left us a clue. It's giving us an answer. The universe is speaking to you, but you know how? Through every movement of your elemental being. Through every movement. You are the answer to your prayers when you are no longer the subject behind the wall. The subjective realm is fascinating. Do you know how many ways it has been animated? Do you know how many people have looked at trees and it's become metaphors for them? And that's the cool thing, that life for the human being is not just as a solo inner journey, but it's a collective outer journey. And that collective outer journey deserves to be attended to. So, humanity 2.0, civilization 2.0, is what the intelligence of the being deserves. And what we deserve is that because we are creatures of communication, we really, what's the coolest thing we can do for now until the massive technological revolution occurs, you know, is to evolve our language technology, to evolve our inner technologies, and to study language. 2020 onwards should be the moment where all human beings are fearlessly communicating with this living world of ours. You have to care for the only thing that is here for you to care for. A new ethos must emerge, a new narrative must emerge. And so, for the first time, more than we need warriors, we need poets. We need communicators. We need human beings who realize that there's a value to the inner dimensions, and we should discover this value before we get trapped in the technological box. You see, because if human beings are, it's kind of weird, right? We're like creatures born on Earth, but we don't want anything to do with the Earth. We don't want anything to do with nature. We're running after a technological reality. So it's strange. It's as if it's like Earth is not our homeland. It's like we're not from Earth, you know? I wouldn't be surprised, because when we look at it, we don't care for it. We don't care for it. We care for our inner, not inner, but it's like the self is more important than the self of selves, which is the species' overall advancement. one can say for an artist, there's no such thing as failure. It's just unfinished work of art. Life, there's no failure to life. It's just unfinished. You know, there was a Zen master, I think it was Shunryu Suzuki, or I could be wrong. There was the Zen master who said something like, somebody asked him, "What's life, man?" And he was like, "Well, it's like building a boat and then getting on this boat, building a boat and a paddle, getting on this boat and paddling into the middle of the sea, and then suddenly the ship sinks, the boat sinks." And what it means is that the way it seems that we as a civilization are conditioned, we are living with a sort of vitality of our inner realms, not realizing that at some point, existentially, physically, the creature gets plugged out of the simulation, the linguistic simulation. So, what does that mean? That means if you don't realize your mind is holding thoughts, you're going to freak out when it has to let go of them. So we have to advance the user of technology, which is the experiencer, and the external and the technology, which is the objectivity and the subjectivity, the objective realms. You know? So we gotta have a healthy body to a civilization, and we gotta have a civilization with a healthy mind. And the healthy mind tends to be one that sees the percentage of possibility higher than impossibility. Really, that's it. If you see something 51% impossible, you're gonna do it. The missing piece is just caring for the process. Really, gentleness allows you to view the inner realms. External excitement and movement keeps you in the outer realms. You know, that means when I, for example, move a cup from one part of the table to another part of the table, there's no thought. There's no, my belief system didn't change. Do you know? Because the objective movement was moving the subjects. But when I close my eyes, the subjects are moving the context in which my eyes will open up to objectivity. It's a very unique situation and an incredible one, this life of ours. Because nobody knows what's going on. Because if they did, they would not be themselves. They cannot be just a fragment. You cannot just be a drop when this drop is falling into a river. And the evolution of consciousness is towards an inconceivability, but this inconceivability is like a raindrop falling on into a river, into a stream, the stream entering the river confronting the waterfall, the grand shift, the 90-degree shift of that our civilization requires to do, but it's not relevant now. It's pretty much some point in the future where we're going to it's going to be more normal to be a collective being than an individual being. Right now, it's like strange. You know, when we think of collective beings, we think of, ancient ar- um, archetypes of ancient personifications of the universe, or we think of extraterrestrial or that which is unfamiliar. So if Dogen said you study yourself, you forget yourself, and then you pretty much are enlightenment, you awaken to the nature of all things. What is the nature of all things? That you, dear being, are the light in your eyes. What greater enlightenment can there be than the instantaneity of light being existence conscious of its own experience? Life being an experience conscious of its own existence. There's this person, I forget his name, I think Said Nursi. I remember reading his quotes a while ago. I get a feeling to kind of go into a quote tunnel of just read a bunch of his quotes, and so the audience can get a sense of this man's inner realms. Um, there we go. Here, let me give you some. Let me read like a small bio. He was a theologian, and Said Nursi. He's known with the he's known with the honorific Beduzaman, meaning wonder of the age, or simply Ustad, which means master. And he was a Kurdish Sunni Muslim theologian, and he wrote the Risali Nur collection, and he's giving pretty much commentary on the Quran that exceeds 6,000 pages. Wow. And he was born 1877 in Hizan, Turkey. Said Nursi says, if you want an enemy, the soul, in brackets, he puts nafs, which he says the ego, nafs means ego, he says is sufficient. If you want advice, death is sufficient. That means your own mortality is the most up-to-date way. It's the greatest knowledge. You realize things end, and you gotta go look at your world. Said Nursi says, I am not free and independent. I am a traveler with duties. And when he says traveler, he means there is a rhythm to personal intelligence that one can say predestined, or one can say the seeds were planted from before, or whatever. Said Nursi says, worry is itself an illness, since worry is an accusation against divine wisdom, a criticism of divine mercy. That means the idea to worry is going against, for example, the religious concept that God has everything in control. Said Nursi says the truth cannot be deceptive, and one who sees it cannot be deceived. Said Nursi says the mirror to the beautiful is beautiful. That's a beautiful sentence, guys. The mirror to the beautiful is beautiful. Said Nursi says he causes huge bodies like sun to proclaim his majesty through his names, the all-gracious great, reciting, O glorious one, O great one, almighty one, while tiny animate creatures and fish proclaim his mercy, reciting, O gracious one, O compassionate one, O generous one. You see, guys, it's kind of interesting. The moment that in the 6th century there was the development of, I say, the personification of the universe and language, in revealed language, it was another way where people began seeing a mind to the universe. And this mind, for some people, like for example, Said Nursi, we see, oh gracious one, oh compassionate one, for example, through uh, the gate of love. This man has kind of seen the animate intelligence of the unknown. Said Nursi says the heart does not derive pure pleasure from what is impermanent. Said Nursi says, do what you do only for God's sake, start for God's sake, work for God's sake, and act within the sphere of God's approval. So to kind of take that in on a psychological level would imply that you're doing things for the source of everything, and for the sake of everything, and for the sake of what everything wants itself to be, and you're acting within the sphere of everything's good approval, where you can say maybe it's a yin-yang balance with the universe. Said Nursi says life is a manifestation of unity. Guess we don't need to speak about separation anymore, guys. Dualities, out of the picture, guys. No, I'm joking. Said Nursi says, can you not see the numerous designs made by God as signs, similitudes, or analogies of resurrection? He has placed them in every era, the alteration of day and night, even in the coming and going of clouds. Side Nursi says, a thing's innate disposition does not lie. I guess we can end the quote tunnel here. A thing's innate disposition doesn't lie. That's kind of saying like you can't lie to yourself because you're always witnessing it. It's like that's the conscious waking state pretty much. You get to see yourself happen. So anyways, guys, I wanted to make this note. I was kind of thinking about how I can evolve the direction of these talks of mine and like what's a fruitful way of going about it. So I first had this kind of Facebook group called School of Athens 2.0. Then I realized I remember having an experience a while ago that it's not safe. Like the groups can be infringed upon by other users, you know. So pretty much the groups can be hacked. But what it is I decided to create a community on Patreon. Now let me tell you what I'm trying to do. I decided that I don't have that much time to be on social media. So I thought of, but I go about, like, I just have this habit for a couple years where instead of listening to music throughout the day, I rather listen to see what ideas are roaming the streets of the earth. So all the video and online content that I personally go about looking through the day, I will share. I'm going to share, like, pretty much what I feel are certain videos that are useful. And also anybody in the community can engage way more openly than here in the chat section, and it's just a better community, I think. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope this talk was helpful. The efforts of all these talks are not for me to show you something that's from me. It's to kind of say that every person is alive once with an opportunity to not just know their world, but to also get to know how their mind is a positioning of their world. So to study the self is another way of saying to kind of notice in your conscious waking state, to be mindful of how the moment is happening. And eventually, the moment the person accesses an unknown direct experience, automatically the knowledge will shift. So creativity is literally another angle on a subject because the experiential depth increased. Pretty much I'm saying it's like your mind is a Rubik's Cube. You got to figure out the algorithm by looking at how your life has happened so far. It's an instrument that you master by living it and caring for it, believe it or not. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in, and much blessings. The eyes of man may close, but the eyes of existence remains open. To be free before you need to be. I think that's the ultimate.